Do you miss it?
Do I miss California? You know, it's very difficult for me to look at that part of the past because it's been so like, when you've worked in Hollywood or even in mainstream media, and then you've worked in independent media, it's difficult to have a neutral and objective perspective on it because I've personally been quite significantly attacked. And so I can't like sort of go, oh, those were the days, because I look back at that time and it's like, that's the time that, you know, sort of pertains to pretty serious attacks on me and my family and the people I love. But I will say that there were, like, when I was living in LA and making movies, there was one day where in a single day I met with Larry Charles, the director he directs a lot of Seinfelds and Curbs. Peter Bainham, he's like a writer that works on like a lot of really good British comedy, and he also wrote like a lot. What else did he write? Peter Bainham, he wrote like Borat, for example, and the director Kevin Smith. And I met all those guys in one day, and like I mentioned them not because of sort of star power, but because they're like, you know, as well as what we all recognise about Hollywood, all of the superficiality, the corruption, and since revelations around Epstein and Diddy and whatnot, and acknowledgement that there might be some serious seedy stuff going on, well, beyond seedy, criminal stuff going on there. What we are inclined to forget, because we've come to regard it either as commercial, corporate, vapid and vacuous, or sometimes downright satanic, is that there are very brilliant people there as well, making money from their imagination, nerds and geeks. And I was lucky enough to work with a lot of those people, or brilliant actors, like someone like Helen Mirren, who's amazing, or someone like Jonah Hill, fantastic, or Judd Apatow, like, you know, really gifted, brilliant people. So I try not to let my general sense that those institutions are in some way negative, culturally negative, and to me personally have proven to be somewhat negative. I try not to forget that there were very beautiful people and some rather beautiful experiences sort of within that time. But the question was, do you miss it? Yeah. And I suppose the implication, the answer to that question is no, because, you know, like look at you, you've worked in like mainstream media. How did you end up there? Why did you end up there? If this pathway had existed then, you'd have took it, no? Like if it was like, oh, I can just directly do this without dealing with all of these brokers. Yeah, fine.
Yeah. Yeah. But it all has to happen. Like I now, I think with experience, age, wisdom, all the things, stuff that is not fun, stuff that's difficult, etc. It's like I wouldn't change any of the crap. The journey to me is completely necessary in every aspect to get to the good today, you know? And I don't know that you have the full appreciation for the free state of Florida, if not for having lived in California, or for me having lived up in the Northeast for the last 17 years. Like it took all of that to get to here.
Yeah.
And then it's different too with family, right? So is everyone adjusting well? Because you have your wife, you have kids.
Yeah, they love it in Florida.
They do.
Yeah. We spent I'm a person, I lived most of my life in cities. London, I've lived in New York some, I've lived in Los Angeles a bunch. At this point in my life, I'm not really a city person. I don't think cities are necessarily negative. In fact, I heard some good scriptural analysis of the city, that the city is a biblical concept, that the city can be a place of God. The city needn't be a place of damnation. It's easy to reach that conclusion when you see, poverty, suffering, exploitation, values that seem to be materialistic to the redundancy and reduction of all else. But cities can be holy and heavenly. Indeed, the idea of the holy city is a sort of a consistent theme in the Abrahamic faiths. But for me, I need to be quiet, calm places as some sort of counterpoint, I imagine, to the Tokyo of continual chaos within my own mind.
When did that really begin?
When I got my wife, I think, when me and Laura got back together before we got married and before we had children, I'd come out of, like, after Hollywood and LA and acting, I came back to London. I started getting involved in media commentary in the UK. And I had a YouTube channel then and talked about British politics. And you can't talk about politics for very long without arriving at some pretty significant and potentially contentious points. It's corrupt. Right now, you can make a generalized statement like that without too much trouble. If you start delineating and describing how it's corrupt, who it's corrupt, and how the corruption is working, who's funding the corruption, who's benefiting from the corruption, you get into some pretty serious trouble pretty quickly. And that happened actually in 2015 when I first started doing content online and talking about primarily British politics, because I was in Britain, although I did sort of content about Fox News and Bill O'Reilly then, who I imagine now I would love to speak to, but I sort of like criticised him about a bunch of stuff, mostly in a good-natured and good-humoured way. Even once turning up at Fox's building in New York to sort of talk to him. Now, this was before the rise of Tucker, who I now consider to be a good friend, but Bill O'Reilly was...
of who? The rise of who?
Tucker Carlson.
Oh, Tucker Carlson.
Yeah. Like Bill O'Reilly occupied, it seemed to me at least, that territory on the channel. And anyway, like, so mostly I was talking about corruption in British politics. I sort of like said, like, there's no point voting because if you vote for either the Labour Party, as it was then under Ed Miliband, or the Conservative Party, as it was then under David Cameron, what you're getting are centrist politicians that appear to be controlled by globalist and corporatist interests, and no one is gonna represent you, the ordinary British electorate. Now, I would have been coming at that from an ultra left-wing perspective, although for me, left-wing was not about empowering the state. It was about empowering the people. And I think the deception that's embedded within state socialism, and is there any other kind, is that the state are going to govern on behalf of the people, are going to support the people. Now, what I've subsequently come to consider is that the state and corporate power are so aligned and embedded that you have what Mussolini would have called and did call fascism. That's the kind of fascism that we need to concern ourselves with. Anyway, so like that was the last that was a big thing that I went through. Like after I said there's no point voting, it really kicked off in my country. It was one of many times in my life where I've been the centre of scandals. Some of them I've certainly participated in the generation of, because I've always been not always been, but at points in my life I've been pretty hedonistic and Epicurean. I've pursued pleasure in ways that was pretty, I suppose in retrospect, reckless and selfish, and you create some conditions for volatility with that kind of lifestyle. But most of the things that have been generated have been related to me being outspoken on contentious and difficult subjects, like the influence and power of corporations, like the projects of globalism, in particular the corruption that was revealed during the pandemic period, and the necessity for ongoing war to support industry, and the exploitation of ordinary people, the lying and division, the corruption of the legacy media. And once you start getting into this stuff, you will attract attention.
Yes. And then some, right? Yeah. So it was 2015 when you really kind of, that switch was kind of flipped. Was it an accident? I mean, was it an intentional moment where you said, I'm going to say this and I know what's going to come, but I'm going to say it? Or did it just happen?
It's like, this is where I come from. Like, I come from a normal little town in Essex, come from a normal background. I'm a recovering drug addict. I know that you don't trust the government. I know, we've always known, that you don't trust institutional power. You know it not in an academic way because someone's explained it to you. You know it because that's what everybody experiences. And you learn, these systems pretend they work for you, but you work for these systems. So if you're a drug addict, you're a criminal by definition. Drugs are illegal. So you live outside of these systems. So by the time I become a famous person, I'd already lived a life. I was 30 or 31. I'd already lived a life as a junkie, as an alcoholic, as a person that makes their money, in some of the ways that you have to do that. I'd lived on welfare. I'd lived outside the system. So by the time that I sort of got successful and famous, I already knew who I was to a degree, and I already knew, I was in recovery and I was clean. So when I said that stuff, it was just I didn't say it to intentionally provoke. I said it because it's what I've always felt and what I've always believed.
But was there hesitation because you knew, once you take that turn and you're going to say what you're going to say about those certain groups?
No, I didn't think about it that way. Awesome. I didn't think about it that way. Maybe I wouldn't have done it if I had. I didn't think about it that way. But obviously it's sort of in part in mine. I actually believe really strongly in freedom, Sage. I really believe in my freedom. I believe in your freedom. I believe in those things very strongly. I don't like people telling me what to do, and I know people don't want me to tell them what to do. It's very deeply inhered in me. And so when I'm still like it, when people try to control me, when people lie about me, when people impose systems on me, I don't like it. So it's sort of it's not something that I have a great deal of choice about. It's sort of near pathological. I don't want to sort of make such a claim, but it sort of seems to be part of the way I am. So the reason in 2015 I said that is because I couldn't not. And the reason that we moved to the countryside is because if you've ever been at the centre of anything like that, and I've been at the centre of it a few times now, it's overwhelming and it's exhausting, and it's I just felt like I've had enough of this. I don't even care. I don't even care. I just want to be a father and be a husband and work stuff out. But sure enough, again, I find myself sort of drawn back into it. I don't know, it happened again in COVID. I can't sort of seem to prevent myself from talking